consists of the shoulder blade, which has a spine or ridge, and the highest point of the shoulder blade is normally at the tip of that spine area on the blade. You have an upper arm that ostensibly should be close to a 45-degree angle from the point of the shoulder, and then connects into the elbow and goes down into your front leg. Now, do you take your withers at the highest point of the shoulder blade, or do you take your withers at some other portion of the anatomy? I think my favorite reference, and if you haven't got this book, I recommend it. The new Canine Structure and Terminology book that was put out by Ed Gilbert and Thelma Curtis Brown. Thelma Brown worked with her husband Curtis, who was an engineer, some years ago, and put out The Art and Science of Judging Dogs. I still think it's a brilliant book, but it's out of print and almost impossible. And this is the new kind of, for those who couldn't get the out of print book. And in here, and I think also in the handout that Kay put together, is a printout on the fact that generally we consider the withers to be the portion between the blades around the second and third thoracic vertebrae. And that consists, if you know your thoracic vertebrae anatomy, there are ridges or spinous processes, there are projections on those vertebrae. There are the first 8 to 9, usually thoracic vertebrae 1 to 9 is considered to be the whole portion of the withers. And around the second or third is where your shoulder assembly connects by muscles onto the thoracic vertebrae. So please remember, and there's just one point I would like to make about this, is that the shoulder assembly is attached to the dog's body by muscle. It isn't like wired in with bony structure. It is a loose hanging assembly. Your rear end, however, it's a ball and socket, because your hip joint, site of some of our hip dysplasia problems, is affixed in a sense because it is a ball and socket structure, and you have your pelvic girdle, which is a firm structure. So you have a whole different kind of an assembly between the rear end and the front end in terms of the way they support the dog. Now, the weight-bearing part of your dog is your front assembly. So if you think about, or the majority of it, you're looking probably about a 60-40 weight-bearing variation. So you're looking in the two parts with the shoulder assembly and the rear hindquarters. The old argument, which is more important, a good front end to bear the weight, to carry and support your dog, or the propulsion, which is your rear end structure. I don't think one is more important than the other. I think you need to keep in your head, however, an awareness that maybe the front end is a little more difficult. We all say it's more difficult to breed a good shoulder, right, than it is to improve a good rear end. As far as, and I'm going to have to move away from the microphone here, so I'm going to do my best to make sure you can hear. When we're working with the dog in question, he's young and new and just learning. When you are feeling for shoulder assembly, you're going to find the bony ridge, which is the spine of your shoulder blade. You're going to find the high point of the shoulder, and you're going to go between it. And in this dog, and in most of your dogs, you may want to go away. I don't want you doing it to this dog. Go away and do it on your own dog. You should be able to feel the spinous processes of the thoracic vertebrae. And in between those, just forward of where the neck is present on the dog, is the point normally where you will identify the withers. So we do a lot of things like, the old days of dowel lines. Do you all know the book I'm talking about when I use the dowel lines? It's an old horse book that was translated to dogs, really, is what it was. And he talked about movement and dog locomotion, and he used a lot of dog terminology in it. And he created the 45-degree angle myth on dogs, because in horses that is pretty close. And when you are coming down and locating this, we are looking at where those two shoulder blades come together. And we are aware that when we take our dog's head and drop it down, something happens to those blades. They move. There's a range of motion on your shoulder blade of approximately 30 degrees, 15 forward, 15 back. That's the usual rotation. And you can identify that on your own dog by just lying him on his side, and he's trained to lie still when you blow him dry, and rotate the blade. You usually have a range of about 30 degrees on a good shoulder. The other part of your shoulder that you need to be able to identify anatomically is the point at which your shoulder blade area is meeting with the upper arm. Because this, and again the other myth, is the desirable is that from the point of the elbow to the point of the shoulder is approximately equal in length to the point of the shoulder to the top of the blade. That's not inaccurate. One of our problems with our short, restricted fronts that we're getting in English Cockers is, of course, that we are losing the length here, which gives us no, in the upper arm, which gives us no room and no flexibility to allow our dogs to reach. Personally, I don't pay a whole lot of attention by feel in this area. I pay a great deal of attention by feel to what I find happening here. That's in the angle at the elbow from the point of the shoulder. I want this angle here visible, and I want to be able to feel, because what that tells me is my dog has set his front underneath him. Why? He's weight bearing. If my dog is weight bearing up here, what's going to happen? My whole insides are going to drop down. I'm going to lose the support under the part of the dog, the big rib cage, all of the things that are heaviest in his body. If the whole shoulder assembly is riding forward with a short upper arm, no placement underneath the dog, he's not going to have a weight-bearing position. Generally, in most cases, your weight-bearing position is approximately there. That is your center of gravity. So if you are looking for your center of gravity to be supported, you want it under the heavy part of the dog. That is the logical. Everybody okay? Yeah. Okay. I was The other part of the anatomy that I am also looking at this point is the length of the neck. Now, I know we'd like all of our geese to become swans. All right? But please, don't swan neck your English cocker. Because as soon as you do, nature being what she is, you lengthen and look for this. Guess what else you're going to lengthen? The whole of the rest of the dog. So this is why I say moderate, balanced. The other part, and I love this little dog for this reason, is that when I look down on him, I see width through here. He has a little waist because he has a loin, but he has a loin that has width over it, and he has rounding and thickening to his quarters. So I know that there is going to be strength and muscle. And these are important parts. The other thing, we talk about, I always say to people, I want a long rib on my dogs. And I had people say, you want what? Yes, I want a long rib. Meaning, I want a rib cage that extends well back on the dog. This little dog's rib cage comes right back to here. And you go back and check your dog. This rib cage ends up here. You are maybe needing to be, and probably you could be just as short overall as this dog. But what you are dealing with is
it has his length in his loin, which is the weakest, and he's suspended. There's no support there. There's nothing supporting this dog except muscle. So if it's narrow, you're even in more trouble. But if you have a longer rib cage and a shorter connection, there is a firmness, a little more strength in your back. So that is an important part. All right. The other place that I always like with my own dogs, and it's just a small suggestion here we're looking, is I take the ischium, or the two pin bones under the tail, and I cup under here. And I want to feel some width and roundness. If you feel that this is pinched, that if you are ending up with a dog that is narrowed in here, that there is a lack of width, you could also feel the musculature in the upper thigh at that point with that cupping. I'm looking for a dog whose tail gives me a slight drop into the tail set. I'm sorry, folks, this is not what an English Talker's tail is meant to do. And we are getting them. Please, it's not one of those things that you throw away your good dog because he does this. But you pay careful attention. If you have a dog who's doing this, little dog doesn't want to let you do it. It's not something that you throw the dog out for, but it's something that you do not double up on in any way if you can possibly avoid it. That is an important feature.
Barbara's question was referring to the fact that on the loin, it is important also when you're evaluating rib that you make sure, try it this way, that you make sure that the rib is not cut up so that you are extremely tucked up, that there is depth. And remember with your rib cage that when this is being evaluated, you're looking for a rounding. This is the widest point of your rib. Then it tapers, and the tapering allows for the action of the front leg so that when your dog reaches and moves back, there is space for the elbow to allow, because of the slight taper of the rib cage, underneath into the keel area. Am I still making sense? Stop me if I'm off base here. All right? Since we're working with this patient little dog, I will make a couple of other comments about him that aren't all anatomy. I think I would like to comment on the straight coat. The English Cocker is not a curly-coated breed. I would like to comment on texture of coat. Please remember always, a lot of these things that are in our standard are there because they relate to the function of the dog. This is a hunting flushing spaniel. He needs a coat that can protect him. He has a double coat. He has an undercoat and an outer protective coat. And let's not barber off all of the outer protective coat. You will notice when I judge, I always do this. I don't want to be spiked. And I want to feel that you've allowed some coverage on this coat to protect this dog. I want to see that there is a texture that is not cottony or linty. All right? I'll take a little curl. I mean, we all have varying amounts, but not, please, it should basically be a fairly straight coat. On the rear end, I'm looking for moderate sweep of stifle. I'm no strength. That means width this way and width this way. So it's both this way and the other. I'm looking for a hock that is relatively short in its drop to the ground. And one of the easy ways, when we were talking yesterday, for those of you who were here for the judges one, we were doing a little bit of talk, there was quite a bit of discussion about amount of angulation. An old-fashioned but fairly useful strategy is to take your hock, lift it, fold it up to the dog. If your hock is straight to the ground and is touching the pin bone, you're probably pretty close. If it ends up, he can't do it because he is correct. If it ends up back out here and get a straight to the ground, are you all with me on what I'm doing? hard on a black dog. Take your hock, fold it up, take your finger and feel with the hock absolutely perpendicular to the ground. Feel the point of the hock and the point of the pin bone. These are absolutely in line on this little dog, which tells me that he is not over-angulated, that he's moderately angulated, and that the pin bone and the hip are in line. The other measure that is useful to pay attention to on the front is the old traditional one of taking the point of the withers, dropping the straight line. It should pass through the elbow and just come out the back of the foot. That's a useful one. Diane.
What's the difference between a steep front and a straight front?
Not a lot. Steep is usually quoted to refer to the placement of the blade. In other words, if you take the measure of the angle of the blade off the vertical, if it is straight up and down, it's close to the vertical, it is steep. If it is laid back, I'm exaggerating obviously, but if it's laid back on the dog, remember your shoulders have to fit over the dog. They also have to have some shaping. The blade itself has to fit over the dog. Usually, what people are, when they talk about a straight shoulder, they're talking about the upper angle, the upper arm angle, and this not being in here, that this being straightened out so that the dog is standing with this straight look as opposed to an angle that is fitted back. But steep normally is used to refer to the layback of the blade. Most people. There's a lot of terms, yeah.
Those angles are sort of with respect to the side of the dog. Could you talk about the position of the shoulder blade with respect to the center of the front? That is, some dogs seem to have shoulder blades that come in.
And they do vary from breed to breed. Let's talk about other breeds for a moment, because I think one of the things that's important to remember is that you learn anatomy on English Cockers by also paying attention to bulldogs, to Chihuahuas, to Silky Terriers, looking around at people, to Irish. You learn different facets. And some breeds, like bulldogs, the wide-chested breed, French bulldog, all right, Chow to some extent, which is more straight, will have a slightly different placement. And sometimes some of our English Cockers emulate the placement of those and create for you a very upright shoulder, a dog that is wearing a tilted shoulder, that is tilted forward on the body. And in many cases, I'm not really terribly concerned about why they're doing. I'd like to know what's happening when they do it. So I'm watching them move. I'm a nasty judge who makes people move a lot, because I feel that what I see here stacked on the table must also be retained and visible when the dog moves, because that's the true test of whether what my eye says is there is really, really happening. So I will spend a lot of time paying attention to profile movement because I'm looking for what is happening at the withers. Is there a lot of lift and up and down action on the blade? What is happening here in the hindquarters? Am I seeing the strength of the kick and the fall through? Is the dog maintaining a level top as it travels? And I think that, yes, we do. We will have shoulders that are tipped. We will have shoulders that are often, and those are often shoulders that are too far forward, that ride forward on the dog. They can create sometimes the look of a very dramatic top line, and this is where our English Cockers are not meant to be ski slopes. They're not pseudo-Irish setters with short tails. You know, we do sometimes, particularly, and I think we're getting better. I really think that's one of the trends that is positive, that I think is getting a little better, that we are not putting the extreme angulation on our dogs, and we are not putting the very, very extreme sloping top lines when we stack them, and I'm really proud of that, because I think that is a shift that has occurred in the last few years. Feet, important. This is a working dog that has to go out and work in heavy terrain. He has to go in under deep bush. He has to be able to last a lot longer than we usually ask him to last in the show ring without breaking down, and those feet are important. They must be deep, cushioned, and relatively tight, and not too big. This is not a breed where the feet, and I think the solids are lucky. I always think the solids get off well on feet. They always seem to be able to get tighter feet that fit the bone and the leg better than the party colors. There's something that we have to work harder in those party color people, because I think we have a little more difficulty with that. Can you just sit for a moment, because he's being incredibly patient.
He's being very patient,
He's
yes.
being very patient. Can you just turn his head slightly?
That's
The other part of this that is very important for me is head detail on the English Cocker. You're looking for, when you look straight at the dog, two eyes that look straight towards you, that are not heading out east and west. You're looking for an animal that has a clean line. When I'm putting my hands on an English Cocker to, just put your hand behind you, put my hands on him to hold him, I like to take my two fingers and expect that I'm going to get a very, very slight narrowing chisel, but very slight. I want these planes to allow me to take my hands on either side of my dog and not fan out because I've got a big wide back skull, or not pinch in because I have a very narrow face. I'm looking for width over the nostril. I'm looking for a dog with good wide black open nostrils. And I'm looking for a dog that has a soft curve, not an English setter head, please, ladies and gentlemen, but a soft curve of muzzle that fits, that when I look at him this way and hide all the rest of the detail, I want to see a soft roundness to the front that tells me that I have some depth and some underjaw in here as well. I'm very concerned that we are getting some temporal side bones on the side of the head that are too prominent. They should be fairly flat. I am looking for fairly flat on top with soft roundness, moderate occiput, relatively low set ear. We are not meant to be down here. Neither are we meant to be up here. It is a fall. Most of us, it says to the eye, but for most of us it is slightly below the eye. And I'm looking for a dark, tight, slightly almond shaping to the eye socket. And that soft expression that we get on this breed that is so characteristic of the breed. I'd like to let this dog go back because he's been incredibly good. Debbie, I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, little boy. And I would like, just before I turn this over to Eugene, because I know he's dying to pound on me. I think it's kind of ironic. There's a degree of irony here for me. Many, many years ago, when Eugene first came to Canada, he came to visit me, and we sat and talked English Cockers, and I knew he loved solids. And believe it or not, not many of you probably know that I bred solids for about 8 or 9 years. And I do like solids very, very much. I have a very big soft spot. But I decided that it's like breeding two breeds, and it really is for me. And I sort of stepped back and said, no, I'm going to concentrate on the party colors. I don't know whether it's just the variety of color, but there's always a very big soft spot. For those of you who've been around a long time, there was a red dog that lived down this part of the world called Sauerbruch Dandelion. And I was responsible for finding him in England and bringing him out to this country. So I feel very, very committed to the involvement with solids. But I would like just to read something that you all have read, I hope. But I'd like to read it and just kind of comment as I go. This is the general appearance of the English Cocker. And if you read nothing else in your standard, carry this in your head. Burn it and engrave it. The English Cocker is an active, merry, sporting dog, standing well up at the withers. All right, this immediately eliminates short legs, low to the ground dogs. This is a dog that stands well up at the withers and is compactly built. So that eliminates our long-bodied dogs. What Annie and a lot of us call the drag of the breed, the field spaniel, you know, long and low. This is where we started from. And the drag of the breed is such that we have to always kind of fight a little bit against it, or we get sucked in